Okay, so this whole session of the Smart Code Calibration 202E at the CNU assumes that the best way to learn form-based code writing is just to do it. So the whole notion is to get your dancing shoes on and go ahead and spend about 4 hours dancing through a Smart Code calibration, but don't worry, there's no actual dancing involved. Your first question is probably why you might want to take this 202 session over all of the other great options that will be waiting for you at the CNU. And this chart shows the form-based code adoptions over the last 30 years around the world, plus the ones in progress this year. So clearly we've reached a tipping point in land use reform in favor of character-based codes. Cities are overscaled to our resource realities of money, petroleum, oil, coal, electricity, natural gas. We are not wealthy enough anymore for the use-based suburban development patterns of the last 75, 80 years. Form-based compact development delivers better economic outcomes. So let's look just at a few of those outcomes and why you might want to take this session and learn how to write these codes yourself. Every place is different on municipal revenue structure, but most 5-story mixed-use development makes city coffers 25 to 40 times more revenue per acre than big box. Per CEOs for Cities study Walking the Walk, your home equity goes up $3,000 for every 1 point increase in your walk score. The equity adds up, so it's good for the homeowner, the developer, and good for the cities and their property tax receivables. Every 10 minutes that you spend in your car is 10% less time you spend in community activities. That social capital adds up. The average American generates 24 metric tons of carbon dioxide every year, but a New Yorker produces less than a third of that. Dense development costs 32 to 47% less for infrastructure than conventional development patterns, according to Morris Beacon of the US EPA, and also corroborated by the City of Calgary in their Plan at Calgary projections. Emotional connection to your community will yield the highest rates of GDP growth, according to the Soul of Community and the Knight Foundation and Gallup study. So in a nutshell, form-based codes should be consensus-backed rules with straightforward processes that deliver predictability and the time value of money. While we're not going to spend a lot of time in the CNU 202 session on these economic connections that we just talked about, this CNU 202 session will give you a major leg up in learning how to craft a form-based code. And for that, I'd like to turn it over to Susan Henderson to talk about the agenda.
So Hazel alluded to the reason this is a 202, this is a 200 level session rather than a general session, and it's largely because of how interactive it is, as well as the depth into which we'll immerse ourselves in developing what needs to be done in form-based code calibrations. This session is specific to the model Smart Code. It will be using version 9.4. Which is currently available by download. We'll begin with introductions and breaking out into group sessions where we reorient based on your level of exposure and familiarity to the model Smart Code. Then we'll do a synoptic survey review in groups. The faculty will have produced the survey in advance because we can't get to all of the appropriate neighborhoods via a walking tour. Then we'll do the form-based code table calibrations, the summary table calibration, and group reporting and critique. All of that will be facilitated by the faculty with sessions interspersed to give you calibration hints and techniques that have been effective over the years. And additionally, this year we have a really special edition where Andres Duani and Stefanos Palazoidis will be each joining us briefly for some special comments. We'll get to that in detail in a moment. So interestingly enough, the Salt Lake City regional area has a very clear and distinct transect. The SMART code is a transect-based code, and from T6, or the urban core, to T1, which in Salt Lake is either the lakes or the mountain, you can see it very, very clearly, that transition in this aerial image of the region. So since we don't have time to visit all these neighborhoods in advance, like I mentioned earlier, we will be providing imagery and mapping of the best areas to use as samples. These are all images from Salt Lake City that are representative of the different transect zones. And then we'll dig into the physical analysis via the synoptic survey. And this is a sample we did for Madison, Wisconsin a couple years ago. But these sorts of images will be produced in advance, like I said, by the faculty. We'll also have available the Synoptic Survey app. You can download that from bento.com if you're interested in using your iPad or an iPhone for calibration techniques. That is a possibility. And then we'll get immediately into some major customization issues, the way in which you legally implement it, whether it's a replacement code, a parallel code like a floating zone, whether it's regional, greenfield redevelopment, or strictly zoning only, and then the customization issues related to local character. Now we will be in Salt Lake focusing heavily on redevelopment. This CNU has tracks for sprawl repair and for thoroughfare redevelopment, and both of those are very critical in using the form-based code tools to begin to redevelop our cities in sustainable manners. And so we'll be talking about ways in which you can use transect zoning districts to immediately replace conventional zoning districts in areas that have good block structure. We'll be talking about the Mormon block, the 600 by 600 foot block, and some of the techniques that DPZ has been using in the region to be able to redevelop and break down those blocks internally. We'll be talking about methods for doing streetscape improvements that make your arterials multimodal and pedestrian and cyclist friendly. And all of those are things that are very cogent subjects, particularly in the HUD, EPA, DOT efforts toward livable communities. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, our guest speakers are very impressive. Mr. Duani will be joining us for a 30-minute discussion on landmines and calibrating form-based codes. As you probably know, Andres and DPZ are the primary authors of the SMART code model and have been using it extensively for many, many years. And Andres has some very strong opinions about things that can be landmines in your ultimate implementability of your code. And he will focus, if I know Andres, he will largely focus on overcomplicating the code and particularly enabling effective administrative protocols. He has had extensive experience with overcomplication and the detrimental effects of that. But just to be clear, both of these guest speakers are in some ways free to ad-lib, and so it should be very educational and very entertaining. Secondly, Mr. Palazoidis will be joining us. He's been working under the El Paso SMART code for the last year and a half and has really enjoyed the experience, has found it very, very beneficial. He spoke about it last year in West Palm, but he does feel like there's some missing links in the model code. And he'll be discussing what those are and how you might augment your SMART code when you do your calibration to make it more effective in your region. Now the reading list is extremely important. This is a 200-level course. We would strongly discourage you from signing up if you're not familiar with the model. We will be going directly forward as though everyone has a basic understanding. So prior to the CNU, you'll need to read or at least scan the Smart Code version 9.4, the link which is here, and also the Salt Lake City Synoptic Survey, which we will provide you on May 13th. The recommended reading list also includes a Smart Code and Manual, the Form-Based Codes book by Dan Perlich, and the Code Study by Hazel Boris and Emily Talon. And we feel like that for the Salt Lake region in particular and Utah in general, lots of Smart Codes have been done in the last 2 years. It's very relevant to the region, particularly for implementing the Envision Utah planning work done by Calthorpe, because the wonderful thing about that regional plan is it has established a very clear vision for the Salt Lake City region. However, it's not given the tools to actually implement the vision. And form-based codes are indeed a very effective tool for implementation of regional planning. So with that, please join us at CNU 21 in Salt Lake City. We'll look forward to calibrating the Smart Code together, and thanks for your time.